Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our informational, was supposed to be a debate about the Prop 1 legalizing recreational marijuana. We made several calls to Michigan Regulate and Regulate Michigan, sorry, and no one ever returned our calls. But we do have Matthew Yaskal, did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
From Healthy and Productive Michigan.
Yes.
And he is going to go over our the debate from his side of view, and he even has some of their ideas so that everyone will get more of a CrossFit section feel. So I will turn it over to you, Matthew, and thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Matthew Yaskold. I'm the grassroots director of Healthy and Productive Michigan, the campaign opposing the legalization of recreational marijuana. So around November 2017, we decided to form the Coalition to Regulate the Healthy and Productive Michigan campaign, as the Coalition to Regulate marijuana like alcohol appeared to be gathering enough signatures for their petition to be on the ballot. A brief overview of their petition. It allows for 2.5 ounces of marijuana to be on each person. So that's for travel, for vehicles, and 2.5 ounces is enough marijuana for a sufficient amount of personal use, and certainly more than what's needed. It allows for 10 ounces at home, which equates to 880 joints of marijuana, and 12 plants at home, as well as 15 grams of high potency marijuana concentrate. So these are actually the highest possession limits in the whole nation. It's what we're voting on right now, with the lowest excise tax rate in the whole nation as well, with only a measly 10% excise tax rate in this proposal. So the proposal, the way that it's written, is allowing us to have the highest amount of marijuana for the lowest tax rate. Now, there are many other issues with the proposal as well, such as vague consequences for selling to minors, such as marijuana use cannot be used in determining a custody case with minors, such as tenants of leased property can consume marijuana in any form other than smoking, and can grow marijuana without any repercussions from the landlord, because their hands are tied with this proposition as well. So even if you're for marijuana, this proposal is not the way to go. I believe that marijuana has affected many Michigan families, and a lot of people say that we're in an opiate epidemic right now, but I think they're wrong. We're in an addiction epidemic. And my personal story I'm going to share with you. I had a friend in college. He used marijuana, and he progressed. It started to damage his relationships, damage his family. He started to like it more than going to class. And eventually he dropped out by the time, or before he completed his first semester. We lost touch, and I was scrolling through my Facebook feed in August 2017 and saw his name November 1989 to August 2017, and I thought, oh my gosh, what happened? I made some calls, I made some calls to some friends, and they said, Matt, he passed away from an opioid overdose. There are many paths to addiction, just like there are many paths to recovery. But the point is, we're being presented with something right now that says making more drugs more accessible is actually going to help. And I drive home down 94 every single day. I drive past a billboard that says, in some states where recreational marijuana was legalized, they saw as much as a 25% reduction in opioid-related deaths. If you tell a lie enough times, people are just going to start to believe that it's true. That sort of application is, strictly speaking, medical marijuana, and it's the industry's interest to conflate these issues, to stroll someone out in a wheelchair and say this is why we need to legalize recreational marijuana. But it's just like me strolling someone out in a wheelchair and saying this is why we need to legalize heroin. And I'm not trying to take anyone's medicine away. That's certainly not what I'm trying to do today. But we advocate for safer practices and bringing in an industry whose interest it is to increase addiction is certainly not what's going to be good for our beautiful state. The tobacco industry saw that if you market to people and you want to get lifelong consumers when you're marketing and you're an addictive industry, that to get those lifelong consumers, you need to market to people under the age of 18. So the tobacco industry did just that. They came up with things like Joe Camel, like the Marlboro Man on the side of the freeway, like vending machines for cigarettes in high schools. And the alcohol industry saw that 80% of their profits come from daily consumers. So we can't kid ourselves when we see things like marijuana-infused cereals, marijuana-infused gummy bears, and candies, lollipops, sodas with cool colors. This is stuff that's clearly blazing down the path that big tobacco has already blazed. And folks, they're here and they're coming and they're gonna try and make profit from our youth. So I ask people to step back and think for a minute. If I came out with something like, or if Purdue Pharma came out with OxyContin-infused breakfast cereals, there would be an uproar. So we can't take what this great state has acknowledged as a medicine and make it free for anyone to use. It needs to be regulated. I have a friend, Dr. Kara Poland, who said, Matthew, let me think of it. It's folic acid. Folic acid grows from the bark on a tree. I would never prescribe a patient to go and pull that bark off of a tree and put it in their mouth and chew it. I tell them to go to your pharmacist who's accountable and it has a drug that's been regulated by the FDA and is concentrated to take folic acid 0.25 milligrams twice a day, 3 pills twice a day, and with a full glass of water and a meal accompanied with it. And that's exactly where we need to be with medicines. So we advocate for that we approve and we're supportive of the approval of Epidiolex, the CBD medication, and we believe that this is entirely about recreational marijuana, trying to target our youth and our families. Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
Somebody wants to get active, spread the word in their neighborhood.
Yeah, so we have a Facebook page. You can get active. You can contact us easily through our website. We have a YouTube channel as well with lots of videos, and you can also email us at info@healthyandproductivemi.org.
Do you have any statistics on how many cities or townships across Michigan are starting to look at bringing in, I guess they call it regulatory places like depositories? That seems to be a big topic at a lot of the townships and city council meetings. Is there any statistics on how that's moving forward, if it's moving forward, or if the neighbors are, or the citizens of that area are fighting back and saying no, they don't want it, or yes, they do want it?
So that's a great piece too. This proposal does not allow for the opt-in, which is written right now for medical marijuana, where if my community would like medical marijuana to happen, if we'd like to have dispensaries in our community, we could go in front of city council and encourage them to opt in to that proposal. The way that this one is written, it's written as an opt-out. So communities that might not have the manpower behind keeping medical marijuana out within the 10-day window that they have if it's voted in, that businesses can start to open up and start to practice within the confines of that law, that a lot of our communities are just gonna be bombarded with recreational marijuana dispensaries. Your question was, however, about medical, and although I distance myself from a lot of the medical pieces, a lot of feedback that I hear in communities is that this isn't what we wanna have. I spoke to a father out on the west side of the state whose son was given medical marijuana just because there's broad access to it. And he was given high potency medical marijuana. Another piece of this proposal, marijuana can now be up to 99.9% THC in its extracted form. His son was given high potency marijuana and drove home and drove right into a semi truck, and he passed away. And that happened a year ago around this time. So
Well,
this is something that is extremely dangerous for our youth.
Have there been studies done in the states that have legalized marijuana about if there's more addictions to opioids, because it has been termed a gateway drug, and so where addictions go up or where fatalities and car crashes go up or down, have they done any studies in the states where recreational marijuana is already been approved?
About fatalities?
In any, because they're saying that no one's ever died from a marijuana overdose.
So, yeah, that's a great point, and nobody's ever died from a tobacco overdose either. So I kind of like it when I'm presented with that, because tobacco was a huge crisis, and we're still paying for the repercussions of tobacco, and more people die from tobacco-related illnesses than people are dying from the opioid epidemic right now. It's just indirect public health issues and indirect physical health issues as well. Also, when we look at projected income, how many people have heard someone say, "Oh, thank goodness for alcohol tax and cigarette tax. I'm so thankful that came through." That money's never talked about, because there's not that much money coming from alcohol tax and from tobacco tax. Those dollars aren't even enough to pay for alcohol treatment and pay for all the Medicaid costs and dollars that come out of our pockets for tobacco-related disorders as well. So when people say this is gonna fix our roads, it's kind of funny to me, because there are gonna be so many other costs that come along with this issue, like traffic fatalities, like public health costs, and even regulation costs as well. So while we were speaking, I pulled up the HIDA, which is a high-intensity drug trafficking report done by a Colorado organization. This is a part of the DEA, and they did a huge study. Since the recreational marijuana was legalized, marijuana-related traffic deaths increased 151%, while Colorado traffic deaths increased 35%. Colorado past month marijuana use shows a 45% increase comparing to the 3-year average. In Colorado, past month marijuana use for ages 12 and older ranked 3rd in the nation and is 85% higher than the national average. So when we make claims that broad access, that recreational marijuana is going to decrease youth use because it'll just be available like alcohol, and we're going to regulate it like alcohol, that doesn't sound so good and doesn't look so good when we look at the data that's shown here on the HIDA.
if this were to get passed, what do you think would be the next step that marijuana advocates would want to do next? I mean, this is obviously not their one little push. This is one push, and then they're going to step on to something else. So what do you expect to see?
That's a great question, and we've seen in Colorado actually petitions circulating, and in California, to legalize the recreational use of psychedelic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, which have hallucinogenic effects on the user. And I couldn't even imagine, and I hope that those don't make the ballot for vote, but that seems to be the path that these sort of radical groups are taking.
I know one issue that became real big in 2016 was home growing, purchasing a home and growing weed out of a home because you get a license. Does this ballot proposal have any effect on that, or do you expect any increase in homes being used for weed growing? Because I know that was a huge complaint in Macomb with the residents, with the smell and the increase in traffic, and a lot of folks were not happy about that.
Thanks for that question. Actually, that brings up a great point, a couple of great points. 12 plants in one home. A marijuana plant, to me, when I first came on board, I was like, oh, it's just a little house plant, right? You can probably clip a little bit of marijuana off, but no, these are industrial sized plants where I've seen photos of people standing in front of them, and I could hold my hands this far apart and this high up, and still the plant could be larger than me. Because these are high volume, high water consumption plants as well. In one growing period, I believe I've seen the stat that it takes about 9,000 gallons of water for each plant through this growing period from clones, not seeds anymore. These are snippings of plants, so the whole seed to sale tracking system that's being put in isn't particularly reliable either. And then we've got these massive plants which could absolutely create a havoc in a community, so real estate value can decrease, particularly with outdoor grows. We've seen that in northern Michigan already. People that are unable to sell their homes because they're next to outdoor growing operations, kind of like being next to a cemetery now, or being next to, next to the freeway. It's turning into a bigger issue for people to sell their homes. And another point that you brought up was just mass growing in general. The May 15th NBC News report showed that cartel organizations are coming into Colorado and taking advantage of the lax marijuana laws and actually starting grow operations in these homes because it's less likely for police to go in and bust these sort of groups. And with cartel organizations come crime, come guns, come trafficking issues, and they're taking advantage of these laws, and then they're exporting out of the state or undercutting the legal market. So if you can go into a marijuana dispensary and get these lavender infused or special strain high potency marijuana, or you could just go down the street to the local drug dealer who's undercutting the legal market, we're not even getting any of the revenue from those pieces. So this is not the time to legalize recreational marijuana. First off, having the highest possession rates, the lowest excise tax rate, and being the only state in the Midwest that would legalize that sets us up to be the drug dealer of the Midwest. We saw in Colorado exports after legalization of recreational marijuana increasing 400-some%. So, a lot of concerns with that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Any more questions?
I could play
I'm
devil's
asking on
advocate.
Facebook right now.
I play devil's advocate with, I've had people approach me and say, we have these vacant industrial buildings, these places where nobody wants to build, or old warehouses because the auto industry, and that the weed companies could come in and revitalize these areas. So what is the counter argument besides, and I like the cartel one, that's a very good valid counter argument. What is the counter argument for that if we are speaking with individuals about the issue that are leaning towards it?
Yeah, so people saying that this is going to really vitalize our market and really create more jobs ultimately too, if we're able to take property that was once not being utilized and utilize it into a marijuana operation that we're going to benefit our economy by creating these jobs and utilizing empty space. But in reality, we see organizations like the Michigan Chamber of Commerce coming out against this and giving very comprehensive lists about why recreational marijuana is bad for employers. The issues that we'll be facing with large businesses considering to come to Michigan, and then weighing things like recreational marijuana higher, because there will be higher employee turnover rates, issues with drug testing, issues with employees having workplace incident-related pieces, and then there are even lawsuit cases that we've seen in Colorado. I encourage you to look up Brandon Coates versus Dish Network. Dish Network, a national organization, randomly drug screened an employee, Brandon Coates, and he failed the screen. They terminated the employee upon failure of the screen, but it cost them a lot of money as he tried to sue them, took it to Colorado Supreme Court for them to say federal law surpasses state law. So I believe that we're a very rule of law state, and that we would have a very similar Supreme Court sort of issue, but it would still be a problem for companies and certainly deter larger businesses considering to coming to Michigan from coming.
And that brings up another good point with the employment. If pot is legalized like alcohol is legal, will companies have a footing to say, I don't want a bunch of potheads working for me?
So companies will have to be careful about how they make their drug-free policies and their drug-free workplace pieces, and especially small businesses have to be careful about that, because the pot lobby right now is trying to make it an employee's right to use marijuana. Now that conflicts with federal law, so that's a heavy, heavy lift, and it's not going to happen. But there are people using that rhetoric right now, so businesses, large businesses, should be concerned about that. I pulled up some arguments as well, common arguments on marijuana. Michigan prohibition takes a financial and societal toll, or a marijuana prohibition takes a financial and societal toll on Michigan. Currently in the state of Michigan, the societal toll, there are, and this is Prosecuting Attorneys Association, 6 people in prison for marijuana related offenses. This is prison. There are numbers that we're being presented with that say there are enormous arrest rates, enormous issues, and we're being presented with this binary by the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol that says we can either legalize or incarcerate. But legalization is really industrialization and commercialization. And there's a better alternative to legalization and a better way forward than incarceration. And our committee, we advocate for a better alternative. We believe there should be awareness campaigns, prevention programs. Imagine if we had half the funding that the tobacco-free initiatives had 10 years ago to raise awareness and combat these stigmatic issues that are out right now. If I just Google marijuana, I can find that it cures all cancer, it cures all epilepsy, which it does. It works with epilepsy, but it certainly does not cure all epilepsy. It treats it. That it possibly makes me a better driver, and it gets rid of all Mexican and Colombian drug cartel. When in reality, their lobby dollars in Colorado were 44-1 when this passed. So we've got an industry who's pushing out misinformation and trying to skew the public's opinion on this for profit. So if anything takes a financial and societal toll on Michigan, it'll be marijuana, not marijuana prohibition. And we need to advocate for a better alternative. I'm seeing another one here that says marijuana enforcement is inherently biased. So my response to biased marijuana enforcement would be that there are disproportionate arrests and systemic issues. But when you just make something legal, but regulate it in, quite frankly, a draconian way, where you can only have 0.25 ounces on your person, 10 ounces in your home, 12 plants in your home, 15 grams of marijuana concentrate, the people are going to exceed those amounts. That's just what's going to happen. And that systemic issue of inherent bias will still be in place. So in communities in Colorado, they saw up to a 58% increase in marijuana youth arrests in minority communities. So that would be my response to that, yes.
Now, here's a question. How do they regulate that? I mean, how do they know that you have only 12 plants? I mean, how do they use that argument to say, okay, we're gonna make sure that this is all they can have, and then there's really no way to regulate it, is it?
It's gonna be a really heavy lift and a lot of pressure on our law enforcement to try and make sure that people operate within the confines of that law.
So we're gonna have to spend more times taking care of the marijuana, making sure that it's all regulated, instead of having them on the street doing what they really should be doing. I mean, other stuff, taking them away from other types of, crimes and so forth. Is that what you think?
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm looking at another one, and I know I addressed this already a little bit, but recreational marijuana legalization will reduce the number of opioid-related deaths. Again, that's conflating the issue between recreational and medical marijuana. And what we're voting on November 6th is recreational marijuana, is broad access marijuana, is marijuana that's not intended for medical purposes. This is marijuana that's intended for recreational purposes, for infusion into breakfast cereals, for gummy bears, for candies, lollipops, sodas with cool colors. And they're not interested in treating someone's medical disorder. They're interested in profiting off of addiction. So that would be my response to that. Marijuana isn't as dangerous as alcohol. Isn't as dangerous as, shouldn't be the standard that we set for anything. I'm not going to sit and argue that something is more dangerous than something else. I'm not going to argue with someone that crack is less dangerous than meth. It's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is an industry that's coming in and is unfettered and trying to profit off of addiction and honestly create a public health crisis. Recreational marijuana legalization has not led to increased youth use. I read the stat earlier. I can pull that back up. This is Rocky Mountain HIDA showing that Colorado past month marijuana use for ages 12 and older is ranked 3rd in the nation and is at 85% higher than the national average. And I'd like to just say that the HIDA it's not some anonymous donor trying to skew data. It's not some study that's done by a nonprofit. This is governmental work that's just tracking data for the purpose of tracking data. So there's no benefit for the HIDA to skew this sort of information. This is reliable. This is a report that's been compiled with a bunch of other resources as well. So I'd encourage anyone who's more curious about data from Colorado to go and look at the most recent HIDA Volume 5 update, which is easily accessible on our website as well, or you could just Google that.
And what is your website?
Our website is healthyandproductivemi.org. And check out our YouTube videos as well. We've got a great series of medical professionals, of folks in recovery from addiction, of faith-based leaders, and of law enforcement talking about all the issues that recreational marijuana will likely bring. They're great videos to check out.
All right, hearing no other questions, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you, Matthew,
Thank you.
For coming out tonight. And sorry we couldn't have the debate that we had planned, but that is what it is.
Yeah.
But you presented both sides adequately, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.